And so this is what I tell everyone. I say, even if you know someone is addicted to cannabis, they're not really addicted to cannabis. They're addicted to escaping feelings of discomfort stemming from trauma. And the coping strategy they have discerned they enjoy to get rid of that is cannabis, or it could be nicotine or pornography, or, going to the gym too much. It could be anything, right?
Let's impact some men today. I think we're going to do a great job.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Modern Man Podcast, where we are on a mission to connect men in pursuit of their potential. Join us as we embrace discomfort, cultivate community, and put wind in each other's sails. Now, if you're ready to take your personal and professional growth to the next level, I'm going to need you to hit that like button, hit that share button, subscribe to the podcast, and you won't want to miss out on the Noble Knights Mastermind group that you can check out for free to find the support, accountability, and mentorship you need to achieve your goals. Get out there, fellas. Join us and become a part of a community of like-minded men on a mission to improve themselves and elevate their capacity for life. And I'm excited to get some win in our sales today. My guest is a conscious cannabis coach. We've had a few discussions, and I got to tell you guys, every time me and this guest get together, there's a lot of laughs, there's a lot of smiles. We're smiling right now if you can see the video. Ryan Sprague on the podcast. Ryan, thanks for being on.
Ted, thanks so much for having me, man. Like you were saying perfectly, any people that when you get together, there's a lot of laughter. Those are the most meaningful connections to me, because it's really like, in order to laugh, you have to feel safe, right? And so like the people that I feel like I can really laugh around are the people that unconsciously and also consciously I'm the most safe around, and so I take a lot of gratitude in being able to be connected to amazing individuals like yourself doing such important work in the world, man. That's so needed. Men's work, it's huge. It's how it impacted my life to an immense degree. And so I love what you and Kyle are doing with the Noble Knights and everything, man. It's super fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Ryan. And to be honest, we're less than 2 minutes in. I've already taken notes. In order to laugh, you have to feel safe. So, folks, you already know what you're in for. I'm gonna do what I do at the beginning of every episode. I step out of the way. I let the guests take control, talk to the audience directly, give an introduction to who they are, what they do, how we got here. Please take the microphone, take the podcast, Ryan, talk to the people, and we can kind of hop into the conversation afterwards.
Beautiful, Ted. I love it. So, guys, you may be wondering why I'm into cannabis of all plant medicines, or why just cannabis, period, right? Well, what I can tell you is that this life chose me. I did not choose it consciously anyway. You can say my soul maybe did, who knows? But, I found cannabis when I was at the end of my rope with anxiety when I was 16. I had tried every pharmaceutical under the sun, all of them in language that I would use today, made me feel as though I was more disconnected from myself. And so, at the recommendation of a friend, I decided, okay, I'll try cannabis. And it was about the third time I tried it that it actually helped. It worked, right? And so by worked, what it really did was it gave me the first experience that I was not my thoughts. So I was reorienting myself from the thoughts to not even the thinker of the thoughts, but the observer of the thinker thinking the thoughts, right? And so I had that opportunity to have that orientation towards that observer. And I had no idea what the fuck to make of that when I was, 16. But all I knew is after that, I just knew like I didn't have anxiety. I was experiencing anxiety within me, but it wasn't who I was. And that was a big learning lesson in my life. And like many people, right, when you find something that works, you want more of it, right? You want more to be able to say, well, where else can this go? And because none of us ever got a user manual for cannabis, right? Very quickly, what was originally something that supported my anxiety became something I started numbing out with. And I wouldn't really figure that out for years, right? With chronic use and things of that nature. But when I was 18, I had my first mortality crisis where I woke up and started peeing blood one day, went to the hospital with my father. And, my father and I had never really had that conversation, right? He had just said, just say no, Nancy Reagan approach. And so on the way there, he had asked me, are you doing drugs? And I said, no, but I am connecting with a lot of cannabis. And I probably used different language back then. And I saw him have this sigh of relief. And it was very interesting to me because, here's my dad who's like, just say no. And he's not upset. Very interesting. So when we go to the hospital, I start showing him a lot of the research I've been doing. And to his credit, he had no cognitive dissonance. He was like, wow, I guess I didn't know what I didn't know. And from that point forward, it became a connection point for my father and I. He didn't use cannabis, but he saw it was helping me. He saw I was in school. I had a vision. I had a purpose, etc. He was like, hey, if this is what you like to do, awesome. I'm cool with that. So I was in school for psychology at this point, and I started realizing that I didn't really want to wear khakis the rest of my life. You know what that feels like, Ted? It's like we're not really meant for khakis, right? Like we want to break out of that, you know? And so,
Yeah.
I didn't really know what I wanted to do about it. But one year I went to the Boston Freedom Rally, which for anyone who's not from Boston, once a year, it was a bigger deal when it was not legal, but everyone comes out into the common and we all just do public disobedience. We all connect with cannabis and we just, yeah, legalize it, right? So I go there and I hear this guy yelling, "Who wants to make butter with me?" I grab his pamphlet, and to my surprise, there's a Cannabis Holistic Institute, right, teaching cannabis education, opening up 5 minutes from my house. Now, this is in 2011, right? So, like, the world of
Yeah.
cannabis was very different back then. Like, the only school that existed for cannabis was in California called Oaksterdam. And then all of a sudden, one's opening up in Boston, Massachusetts. Like, what are the odds of that? So, this was one of the first times, Ted, that I felt a fuck yes from my heart. So, I go home, I tell my dad, I'm like, "Can you help me with tuition?" It's like $500. And he goes, "Hey, man, I'd like to go with you and just see what this is all about." Cool. So, my dad and I go together and we start learning all about this cannabis and all about the pharmacology, the science, the medical, the cultivation, everything about it. And I just get obsessed. And we start growing
Mm.
together, my father and I. We start, really just diving into the world again. He's not consuming cannabis at all at this point. But what ends up happening is I end up interning for the school, working for them. And in 2014, I go to my first music festival and I connect with MDMA for the first time because I had never done any other psychedelic. This is now when I'm 23, other than cannabis. So I connect with MDMA when I'm out there, and I had done a lot of research, because I still had a lot of programming around, like, oh my goodness, ecstasy is going to put holes in your brain and all this stuff. So I do a lot of research and
Mhm.
found, like, actually during that study, they actually gave the participants meth, not MDMA. For anyone who wants to fact check it, you can look it up. But so I start reading about how this medicine's a heart opener. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Right. So I'm like, all right, chalk that one on the list of things I can expect. And so I'm in the crowd and it hits me and I feel this heart opening. And all of a sudden I feel this really interesting feeling towards my father, right? Like almost like a sad feeling, but I didn't really know what it was. And I figured, I'm like, well, my heart's open. I'm in Vegas. My dad loves gambling, right? I'll go to steakhouses. My dad loves going to steakhouses. Maybe I just miss my dad. Well, when I get home, I discover that my dad had just got diagnosed with terminal cancer, right? He had just got diagnosed while I was in Las Vegas. And so I realized in that moment when he told me, neither of us knew how to handle it, right? He didn't want to be viewed as a sick guy. I didn't want to view him as such, but I just didn't really know what to do. So he elected to not take typical treatment and he was just trying to thug it out, right? And just like, push through the pain. And after a couple of weeks, I finally was like, Dad, you should really try RSO, aka Rick Simpson oil, aka full extract cannabis
Mm.
oil. So, for anyone who hasn't heard about this, you can go to Phoenix Tears, check out the Rick Simpson Foundation. But they've been helping people treat and cure cancer through cannabis for about 20 years now. And there's actually PubMed studies out on how THC kills cancer cells, the whole thing. So I convince him, hey, I know this is already stage 4. I know that you're not going to quit smoking cigarettes and all the other things, but can I at least help you with, managing pain? So we took the last harvest we ever grew together and we turned it into RSO and I started administering it to him. And during this time, I thought I knew everything about my dad, but this is when I actually knew my dad. I actually learned who my father was and connected with him because in that softer state that cannabis brought out of him, because again, this is the first time he's ever connecting with cannabis really in his life. All of a sudden, I start seeing a much more vulnerable, soft side come out. I start seeing a side that is able to create closure with his grandchildren, his other children, me, my mother, and most importantly, his own mortality. And so my father ended up lasting an extra year past where they had originally given him as his termination date. And not only that, but he got to keep his dignity and his head of hair because he had a great head of hair. That's where I get it from. So he got to keep that too. And he got to
Nice.
pass it home just like he wanted. And so, after that experience, I was like, wow, there is a whole other level to cannabis that I just did not realize existed. And really, to cannabis, what I mean by that is like a whole nother level that is possible for me that cannabis showed me. Because it's not that you need cannabis for this, right? It's that these plants can be reminders when we get disoriented. And look at society right now. We're more disoriented than ever, right? And so
Mhm.
after that, I ended up working in the industry with over 5,000 medical patients. I ended up, working with them on a range of different holistic health issues as well as just the cannabis stuff because I was a holistic health nut. Really got into it after I had my mortality crisis, peeing blood, and so I'd been learning from Paul Chek and all these people, and so I started supporting them. And after a while, realized that I would have to leave this company if I wanted to really be able to give them the care they needed. And then a corporation bought the company that I was working on out, and After that, it started smelling like office supplies real quick in there. And I was like, I got to get myself out of here. So, of course, that
Here
was a
come the
really,
suits.
yeah, exactly. That was a really frustrating event, right? When it happened. But, one of the things that was super powerful about it was that if they hadn't come in and bought this company out and been the epitome of everything I'd wanted to get away from my whole life, the cheesy sales lines, the cheesy mentality, the weird rules that make no sense, but it's just policy. It's like, was the policy not written by a human being that can change it because it's a dumb policy? Like all of that, if that hadn't all come into my life right then, it wouldn't have triggered me to the level that I needed to be triggered to actually find the strength to overcome that and leave and go out and do my own thing. So I'm very grateful to that company these days for doing that. But, after that, I ended up having another MDMA experience in Las Vegas once again, where I realized that I was actually still connecting with cannabis unconsciously. Right. I thought I was doing it right. I was only connecting with it once per night with a vaporizer, my own homegrown organic cannabis, all the things. But what I didn't realize was the reason I'd stayed at that job so much longer than I had needed to was because during the day I would build up all the frustration necessary to make a change. And then I would go home and just comfort myself to get away from it. And so once I realized this and I just saw it for what it was, I stopped the cycle. And within 3 months, I started the podcast, left my job, created the business. I had no idea what I was doing, but I still created it. And I got into coaching, which brought my whole background in psych back up. And the rest is really history. I mean, I spent the last 4 years, traveling the country and the world in a lot of ways too, and meeting with amazing people, creating the Conscious Cannabis Collective, our mastermind consisting of the most comprehensive cannabis training kit in existence, whether it's the science, the medical, the psychology, the spiritual, the cultivation. We cover everything, man. And so that's a quick expose of how I got to this screen today with you, man. I'm super excited.
I love it. I love it. It's fantastic. My first question is going to address anyone who's still here, who's of the devil's lettuce crowd,
Yeah.
who's of the how dare
Mm.
he debunk some of that, because you mentioned when I hear heart opener, right?
Mm.
MDMA being a heart opener, I think of cacao,
Mm.
which I know also has those impacts for
Mm.
folks. And we don't realize that some of the things we consume on a daily basis have adverse reactions to the body,
Mm.
or lead to adverse reactions to the body.
Mm.
But we look at something like cannabis, like marijuana, and we demonize it
Mm.
and call it the devil's lettuce, or it's taboo, which our limited understanding of it has also kind of led to some of that taboo,
Mm.
I would admit and say. But what do you say to that crowd, for some people who might still kind of turn their nose to it, pun intended,
Yeah.
um, and haven't given it a fair look like your father did?
Yeah, 100%. This is a great question. So, what I would ask them is this, right? Like, what do they view the problem here to be, right? I bet if we ask them, they'd say cannabis is the problem, right? Maybe they have family members that are cannabis addicts, or they have friends that they believe could have done so much more with their life if it weren't for cannabis. And this is where a lot of people get stuck because they're putting the cart before the horse. Unless we're ready to take ownership, radical ownership over our lives, we're never going to make an actual change and become empowered in life. And so, what is more empowering? Believing that this plant that's growing there, not forcing anyone to go harvest it and connect with it, is evil, or that some of the things people do with it are maybe not in alignment, right? Maybe they're coming from distortion. And so this is what I tell everyone. I say, even if you know someone who's addicted to cannabis, they're not really addicted to cannabis. They're addicted to escaping feelings of discomfort stemming from trauma. And the coping strategy they have discerned they enjoy to get rid of that is cannabis, or it could be nicotine or pornography, or going to the gym too much. It could be anything, right? So until we put the attention where it actually matters, we're never going to get anywhere in society with any of these conversations, right? And so what I always say is, when it comes to cannabis, the idea is that people are always going to try these things, right? Chris Bennett has over 10,000 years of recorded history where cannabis is being utilized for spiritual growth and ushering in the next level of evolution for human beings. And so this is nothing new, right? So what's the better thing here? Saying just say no like Nancy Reagan, right? And just expecting people are not going to get traumatized and not know how to deal with it and try to figure it out in the external world with external substances, or actually start really teaching people about the true power of cannabis and about trauma and about nervous system regulation, and really giving people a fair shot at being able to operate the human vessel in a way that actually allows them to understand and understand how to reach a high quality fulfillment in life. Because no one is smoking cannabis all day, every day, because that's what they wanted to do their whole life, right? Like, they're doing that because they're covering something up. And all you do by going after the coping strategy, saying cannabis is the problem, is get them to divert onto a different coping strategy, right? They're just going to put one thing down and pick another thing up, And so that's what I would say to those people out there that are listening is like, hey, what is bad about this plant, right? For me personally, I see everything on planet Earth being created by God, source, universe, etc. And it is perfectly divine in its image as such. And so why would I want to really go against part of me, right? Because what is cannabis? What is everything? We are everything, right? We're the ocean within a drop. And so if we are the ocean within a drop, then anything, people, places, things, plants, animals, etc., that we put hate on or dislike towards is just an aspect of ourselves that we have yet to reclaim into our wholeness. And so when you start looking at this from like a hermetic point of view, right? As within, so without, as above, so below, bringing in some of the, the idea of being the creator of your own reality, it takes radical ownership to say that, like, hey, maybe for some people, cannabis is not their medicine. That's okay, right? Orange juice, I'm sure, is great. It's just not my flavor of juice I like, right? But never am I going to go around trying to tell everyone and convince them that orange juice sucks, we should ban it, or that it's the problem, right? Like, it's not the problem, right? It's just not my personal flavor of ice cream. And then again, if I see someone take orange juice and throw it on someone, do I blame the orange juice or do I blame the person that took the glass and threw it on someone, right? So it's like how we do anything is how we do everything, right? We must look at the only part of the equation that really matters, which is what is the human being doing? And let's look into the patterns, the habits, etc., and figure out if they are in a dependent pattern, what's really going on there and what can that dependent pattern teach us about their lives as a whole. So that's what I would say on that.
If iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. But if you're a man and you're alone or listening to this, then who sharpens you? What's going on, guys? Ted Phaeton here, host of the Modern Man Podcast, also founder of the Noble Knights Mastermind Group. And I'm just out here encouraging you to find your circle. Maybe you're on a personal growth journey and nobody around you understands the new mentality that you're possessing. That's okay. You can find an online community that will pour into you, will navigate your goals and navigate your obstacles, share their experiences, resources, and more. Join the Noble Knights Mastermind Group and try us out for free to tap into a community of men helping each other scale up and reach their goals.
Check out themodernmanpodcast.com. Yeah, and I love that you made that delineation of a coping mechanism going from, okay, if it's not this, it could be a website, it could be a different substance, it could be alcohol, it could be the gym, it could be working out, because these are a lot of different vices and a lot of things that people use to escape and pacify their lives and pacify the trauma, which is an avoidance strategy. So the true question is, okay, what is it you're avoiding and how do we muster up the courage to face that trauma and get the help that we need, if needed, for us to overcome that? And with that framing in mind, and obviously different substances, I'm sure has different half-lives in the body and instances. So this question, I'm sure the answer will be specific to cannabis, but I also want to frame for the audience that when it comes to our relationship with this, it could also be relative to other substances that folks might be battling. So
100%.
when it comes to conscious cannabis consumption, what does that look like for anybody that's listening who says, this isn't a problem for me. I indulge, I connect with cannabis, but what does it look like to have that healthy connection and not the dependency or the addictive behavior?
Yeah. So think about this, right? Like, you run a men's group, and I imagine many men maybe have challenges in their marriage, et cetera, right? So the way that I think about this is just like any relationship, right? Most people have learned that, like, cannabis is just this thing you go home at the end of the night, you use, you don't really think much about it, and it gives you some type of effect that typically is good. But when it's not, oh, cannabis made me anxious, it made me paranoid, it made me lazy, right? It's this thing that I can take, and then I can blame when things don't go my way, right? And think about the analogy here in a marriage, right? Like, the person that maybe is unaware and is taking too much from their partner, and their partner is growing resentful, right? Finally gives them something to, like, kind of like throw the light on them. And what do? They just get more mad at their partner, right? And so when you're thinking about this relationship dynamic with cannabis and conscious cannabis, what it looks like is being consciously aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. and also being aware enough to actually engage in the relationship. And so, what most people have learned to do is smoke weed and throw a movie on. Nothing wrong with that, right? I'm not saying you can't do that, right? But not at the expense of never having the true experience that cannabis really has to offer, which is connect with cannabis, sit in darkness, do some breath work, put a little music on, and you will start seeing real quickly that the real power zone of cannabis is to move you from the head into the body. Now, let me lay out a little equation here, right? If we know that our issues are stored in our tissues from every traumatic, expert out there these days, that whatever traumatizes us gets stuck in the body, and we know also that we are very dominant in our left brain specifically, which is just really the mind, right, as a society, and that we're living in a very like overly driven masculine world, which is not true masculinity. You get that, right? I'm sure your listeners do too, but we'll quote unquote call it masculinity, right? So, like, essentially avoiding feelings, just go, 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 conquering the world, numbing out with alcohol, whatever it takes to keep going. So, like, when you think about all these things, and then you think about why I work with cannabis, it's because for most people, they are not, they're reluctant to go take 5 grams of mushrooms or drink ayahuasca or, do 5-MeO DMT. But cannabis is this thing that even if they don't do it, they've heard about it before. It's not that crazy to think about someone using cannabis in the modern day. And so when they're able to actually connect with this plant, they can move from the beta brainwave state into alpha and theta, which is the doorway to the subconscious. Specifically, theta is the doorway to the subconscious. And the subconscious is also in the body, right? That's where our issues are. And so imagine a world, Ted, where you could be like a crock pot, right? You could set that thing, right? Take some tokes and forget about it, right? Lay down and let the body do what the body already knows how to do, which is heal itself. You know what makes healing hard? You know what makes releasing trauma hard? This thinking that it doesn't just come naturally. Look at a child, right? A child will be eternally happy, right? Joyous, amazing. They're at a store with their parents. They don't get the candy bar they want. They throw a tantrum, right? Because they haven't learned yet that certain emotions are undesirable to have in public or whatever story their parents could give them, right? So they just emote. Their parents probably get a little nervous, like, oh my God, please be quiet, right? Because their parents have that story of being told, hey, be quiet. Kids are seen, not heard, whatever that is. But they have that tantrum. And eventually they don't get the candy bar, right? They leave the store, they don't get their way. But eventually they're just cried out and they come back to joy. That's what the body knows how to do. What happens after you're 6 years old, though, is that your mind clicks in and you start forming stories about things and you start getting programmed from society, parents, teachers, etc., based on their programming, based on their parents' programming. Like, it's just this very distortion-full era in society where now we're becoming aware of it. And so by connecting with cannabis consciously, by choosing to use things like intention, by choosing to create a ceremonial container from which that intention can play out within, right? Taking time to actually like consciously say, I'm going to go meditate after I connect with this plant. And my intention is to figure out a block that I've been having in my romantic relationship. Seems like we're maybe coming from two different perspectives, and I'm aware that it takes two to tango. And so I'd like to see how I might be able to remediate that, right? Boom, you connect with cannabis, go into a meditation. Then the idea will come to you, right? The awareness, the perspective shift. And from there, what you want to do then, and this is where a lot of other people get messed up with plant medicine as a whole, is they think that connecting with the plant medicine is the work, quote unquote, right? It's not. It's the spark that can light a fire, but a spark without any fuel alongside it is just a spark, right? It's pretty, but like, how many times do you want to do that while you're freezing in the cold, right? And so when you're able to actually integrate after these ceremonies, you're able to actually keep that fire fanned, right? And a perfect example of this and why I love cannabis as opposed to other medicines as well is that with connecting with cannabis consciously, you can connect with the same intention that I just gave, right? You're having a trouble in your romantic relationship. You choose to do a ceremonial meditation. You connect with the plant, speak the intention into it, go into your meditation. You get the idea. Oh my goodness, it'd be really good for me to plan a date night, right? You could come out of your experience, open your phone and go, okay, what date? Boom, text my partner. Hey, does this date work for you? I want to take you out to do something cool. Okay, awesome. Perfect. Go right back into the meditation. Like, try doing that on 5 grams of mushrooms, And so I'm always a fan of saying we don't need more medicine. We need more integration. And so, I want people to know, like, I'm not like someone who gets high every day. I'm not someone who enjoys that lifestyle, because for me, getting high every day is not going to allow me to actually stabilize a psychedelic reality in my sober state of being. And so really what I train people to do is, what are you feeling within this experience, right? What do you have access to? and then come back and go, why do you not have access to those things right now? Something's blocking you. So now we get to work and integrate and figure out what that is. And then when you get that gone, now you're able to access another thing that you could only access in the realm of psychedelics. So after a while, your life becomes the psychedelic, right? And there's always deeper lessons to learn, but you start coming from a place of joy. You start healing your trauma. You start lighting up the world around you with how joyful you are. That's the medicine the world really needs. And I'm not saying cannabis is the only way, but it is a way, and it deserves a seat at the table, just like it has for our ancestors for over 10,000 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you see why I had Ryan Sprague on the podcast? I mean,
You make it easy,
bangers,
Ted. You ask
bro.
good questions, bro.
Bangers. What does it look like being highly optimized? What does it look like
Mm,
for any of our listeners who they're dialing in their fitness? And
mm,
I love the way you frame it, because there could be a lot of shame around someone who might be connecting with cannabis in secret,
mm,
who might be um, connecting whatever their choice of medicine might be in secret
mm,
because of the potential taboo around it. But
mm,
what does it look like for someone to reach that comfort, that
mm,
conscious connection, and that highly optimized life?
mm. Dude, great question, man. So, ultimately, I feel as though it might look a little different for each person. For me, like the whole idea of why I named my company Highly Optimized was, I think that a lot of people in the world right now, when it comes to fitness, plant medicines, whatever, are just doing the thing to do it, but they don't really know why they're doing it. And so it becomes like they're disciplining themselves, but like a David Goggins style, just like beat your body up because you just want to see how hard you are. And it's like, I personally just don't really resonate with that. For
Yeah.
me, like everything I'm doing is working towards something, right? So the idea of highly optimized and really what it looks like, at least as I see it, is the idea of doing what is required of you to be able to go be your best self and give your true magic to the world. Because the truth is, Ted, that each of us have a unique set of fingerprints that has never walked the planet and will never walk the planet again. And every one of us has unique magic that will never be seen again, right? And the opportunity we have during this lifetime is to fully express that, right? To reach a state of being highly optimized where it's just you get to heal the world around you with your magic, and you get to get healed by the magic around you too. And so for me, being highly optimized is not so much about the actual individual things you do, and I'll talk about those because there's lots of them, but it's more a state you reach that allows you to have the energy, the bandwidth, the boundaries, the relationships, etc., like to really know thyself to a degree where your whole life is specifically and meticulously chosen to support you in giving your magic to the world. And so
Mm.
for me, there's many things that go into in terms of like what this may look like, right? Like, of course, I'm huge into fitness, huge into meditation, very huge into breath work. I hit all the buttons when it comes to cold exposure, the sauna, methylene blue, shilajit, sea moss. God, so many different things. Yoga. What are some other things? Nootropics. I mean, just like you name it, I love
You're
it. Like
in
I'm
it.
just obsessed with total human body optimization because the more that I feel amazing, the more I can impact in the world, and the greener I can help the grass of earth become, because we all play a small little role, right? And if all of us start doing that together, I don't know what the ripple effect of that will be, but I imagine it will be like what happened when I watched Return of the Jedi for the first time. That feeling of like inspiration that is just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you don't know what it is about it, but it just feels like everything right to your core, especially for men, right? I don't know about women in terms of like if they watch Return of the Jedi and felt like that, but for men, like our hero's journey is everything in this life, right? And so, being able to spread our magic to the world, love one another, like that's really what, being highly optimized is all about. And what I'll say with regards to the little thing you said about the shame thing too is to put it this way, right? If someone is saying something to you that is a diss, or they are trying to shame you, etc., there's two things that can happen, right? Number one, you recognize that, hey, hurt people, and they're doing that based off the fact that they had that done to them. And you can have compassion and still maybe create a boundary if you need to, right? No one needs that in their
Mhm.
life. But at the same time, right, that's just simply you living a different reality. The second thing that can happen is maybe you start feeling that shame, right? And maybe at first you get aggravated at this person until you recognize that the real gift here is that they showed you where you felt shameful inside of yourself. has nothing to do with them, right? And so either way, right, if you're someone who is feeling shameful around, let's say, cannabis use, right, because that's a big one, look at, first of all, the people sharing that with you, right? And ask yourself, like, what have their lives been like? More than likely, if you know them well enough, you'll know they've gone through some things. Also, and this is not meant to be a dickhead statement, but for me, how I live my life, part of being highly optimized is I know what results I'm looking for. So when I go into the world and, when you go online, you get a bunch of people that think they know exactly what you should do, right? So when I get opinions from people, I really look at who they are and I say, are they getting similar results to what I want? If they're not, I'm not going to listen to them. Why? Because it's not the right trajectory. It could be the best advice ever, but it could be to go be I don't know, a circus performer. Like, I don't want that life. I want this life, So I'm looking for people whose values line up for me and things like that. And so I had a lot of family members throughout my time that have shamed me for cannabis use. And you know what I say? I go, that's okay. I'm not looking for the results you want, so I wouldn't listen to that, and I still love you, but I'm not going to allow you to make me into what you think I should be based off of whatever trauma or events you went through. So that's what I would say regarding the shame as well, is that it says a lot more about the other person than it does about you. And if it does come up in you, great. You just found a distortion within you, and every distortion you heal allows you to connect deeper with God, source, universe, really you, right, at the end of the day. And that allows you to bring more joy, be more youthful. Like we were talking about, being able to laugh, being able to like be that connector in the world, give your unique magic to the world and brighten up the world, So that's, that's what I would say on that.
No, I love that. I love that. One couple last questions.
Yeah.
Because before we get off the topic of cannabis,
Yeah.
what would you advise somebody who indulges it? I know we kind of talked about what it looks like to have a conscious connection. What would you
Yeah.
advise for somebody who wants to make sure that they're getting the best stuff, they're treating their body right through that?
Yeah, this is what I'd recommend, right? So we have a 4-step process called the Highly Optimized Way. It's in our Conscious Cannabis Guide. I'll make sure to get you it for the show notes, Ted, as well. But it's
Yeah.
a perfect rendition of when you actually go to connect with a plant. What do? Right? So I'll go over that real quick, and then I have a couple other things that I'll share on either side of that as well. So when you're actually connecting with the plant, let's say you've already found the right supply, you've already discerned it's the right day, right? So the first step is to take a 3-day break per week. And that's not some random rule. Trust me, guys, I'm not a rules guy. But it's simply the fact that if you want to experience psychedelic cannabis, you need your endocannabinoid system not fully saturated with phytocannabinoids from the cannabis plant. That's all it is, right? So if you want to take a day off and go hit the sauna, like whatever, have some sort of break before you choose to consciously connect with the plant in the way that I'm going to talk about. Step number 2 is to set that intention beforehand, right? Like, why are you coming into medicine? I always give the analogy here of, imagine you're a sick kid and your mom comes in and says, Ted, what do you need? And you just look at her and don't say anything. She's like, I have no idea what to get you, right? But on the other hand, if you say, I want chicken noodle soup, you better believe it, your mom's going to come back with chicken noodle soup, right? So cannabis is very similar, right? The plant doesn't know why you're coming there. Its job is to help you, but it can't help you if you don't even know what you need help with. And so set that intention is step number 2. Step number 3 is to create a ceremonial container, right, from which your intention can play out within. I know I touched on this a little bit, but just make sure it's relevant, right? If your intention is to unlock a different perspective on your relationship, probably don't go to a bar room after you connect with cannabis. That's not going to be a good ceremonial container for that, right? Don't go watch a movie after, right? So just be aware of like, what is the best setting I can have for this specific intention? And then step 4 is afterwards, work to integrate, right? Think about the experience, really think about like what came up for you and how you can continue following those breadcrumb trails. So let's say you go in with a creative block, you find that cannabis shows you that you miss painting, come out of it and buy a paint kit, right? Go sign up for an art class, follow the breadcrumb trails the plant gives you. And that's when you'll start getting more synchronicities, right? More serendipities, and your life will become more psychedelic. So that's the process of actually when you're sitting with the medicine, what to do, right? Now, before that, for anyone who's in a place where you can go to a dispensary and purchase cannabis, you're going to be looking for something grown in a organic, no-till, or super soil fashion. It's like 3 ways of saying a very similar thing. No-till is probably the most popular term they have for this. That's the first step. Now, again, the best way to do this is to grow your own, because the energy of the grower growing your plant really matters. And that's something that might stretch a little bit of people's brains. But go look up Joe Patitucci. For anyone who's like, I don't believe that, go look up Joe Patitucci. Go look up his plant wave system, where he hooks plants up to electrodes. Plants are mostly water. You can look at Masaru Emoto's work too, but he hooks them up to electrodes. And when people come in projecting emotions of hate, you see all of their song just go super minor key, right? Really harsh. Their leaves start to droop. And so, like, when someone comes in the positive state, the opposite happens. Their plant starts, the leaves start picking up. They're really excited. And so, if you don't think the grower that is growing your medicine affects it, think again, right? Same way that we understand that we're not going to have meat that was grown in a horrible situation, that's horrible for the animals, and it gets uploaded with stress and anxiety that then we eat and makes us sick. The same thing happens with plants, right? So, if you can grow your own, definitely do so. You can check out Keys to the Kingdom. That's a great company to purchase seeds through. But if you're just someone looking to, purchase cannabis, go in and ask for no-till and just check the company out, right? Just like feel into it when you walk in the doors. Like, does this feel like the Apple store, or does it feel like a real, genuine, like these people love cannabis, right? You're just looking for passion. That's what you're looking for. And then for people that are just purchasing on the street, there is a protocol I have through biogeometry. I'm not going to get fully into it now, where you can remediate it. But at least if you can just look at that cannabis and wish it love and say, like, hey, I don't know maybe where you come from. I don't know how you were grown, but I promise to connect with you with love. I believe that to work really powerfully, if not only to program yourself with, like, I'm choosing to not fall into, like, I don't know where this came from. It might be bad, right? Like, at the end of the day, we create our own reality, And so that's what I would say overall when it comes to pre-buying it, right? Like what you're looking for, how to connect with it, and then what to do after with regards to integration as well.
I love it. No, I love it. I know we're coming up on time, and we talked a little bit beforehand about you're working on and what you're heading towards. And you said something that I've only heard rumblings about: sovereignty movement. Um, we have a couple minutes on the podcast, man. Enlighten me really quick before this will be a teaser for the request of a part two.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure.
Hell yeah, dude, I'm excited. So for everyone listening, I'm new-ish to this stuff. I've been in about 9 months, but I've luckily been able to train with people that are a lot deeper into it than me. It is one of those areas that is pretty cringy at certain times, right? So depending on where you look, you'll probably find some weird stuff. There's a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of, oh, we'll help you discharge debt, blah, 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 right? Yes, it can work. 100% it can work. Yes, all of this stuff is accurate. And at the same time, just be very aware that, like, there are a lot of people out there that know that the draw of never having to pay a bill again will make you pay them money, and they're not acting in good faith. So just be aware of that, right? And I can definitely mention some people that I think are awesome. But really, sovereignty is all about, really looking at yourself as a divine being, right? In the spiritual terms, we say divine being, infinite being, right? In the world of sovereignty, the term is we are the original creditor, right? Now, again, the terminology here is going to be kind of strange for anyone who wants to look into it. It would be way too deep to, like, try to explain it. You're just gonna have to take me at face value. I don't expect you to believe me, but go look into the resources I send at the end, and you can find more about it. But we're what's called the original creditor, right? We are an infinite being. And so the way that the US specifically is set up is that legally the US is obligated to pay all of its citizens' debts. And this comes from the 1933 Emergency Banking Act, where when you look into it, what really happened was the country basically said, hey, citizens of the US, bad news. We got to take all your gold. So you're going to have to turn it in or you're going to get arrested. But in return, we'll pay all your debts. But that part kind of got shoved under the rug. So no one really remembered it, right? And if you go back to Black's Law 4th edition, and you start looking up even the definition of what person means, you'll realize that the legal game is completely speaking a different language, even though it seems like it's English. It's called legalese, right? Many people already know this, but it's a totally different language. And so they have found ways to keep us in chains of our own doing. We probably heard before, taxes are voluntary, these kind of things. They 100% are. I'm not telling anyone, please, and hear me correctly here, guys. I'm not saying you should just stop paying your taxes. There are steps you take, right? Because right now, you have been agreeing to contracts unknowingly every time you're asked, are you a U.S. citizen? You go, yep, I am. And the government goes, okay, well, I guess you're a taxpayer then, because that's what the definition of a taxpayer is, a U.S. citizen. There's a couple other things as well. But you want to reorient and status correct yourself to a non-resident alien, And so there's a lot of interesting things, like I said, in there. But when you learn how to do this, you can start understanding how to live in the private, protect your assets. You start learning about debt and what debt really is, what our currency really is. It's not actually money, it's actually debt notes. So we're paying debts with debts. It's pretty wild. Like back in the day, how fiat currency, or at least, I'll put it the US dollar again. I'm not a professional at this yet, but again, like how this worked back in the day would be like, say you had a big brick of gold, right? Say like $1,000 worth of gold, and you're in the Western area, right? Like you're just back in the 1800s. You're not going to like walk around with a brick of gold, right? Because that can you get you shot, right? Or any of these kind of things. And it's also annoying to carry a brick of gold with you. So you would go into the
Heavy.
town, you would go to a bank, and you would work on you would work out an agreement where they basically give you a slip saying, hey, like we're saying as a bank that you do have this much money, right? So you can keep that on you. Now, when you go out into the world and you're trading, you can trade that debt note, and then they can come back to the bank and get your gold, right? Because here, this is debt note. Cool, I'm owed this much. Now, what it is it's just monopoly money. Our money's not backed by anything. There's no gold. There's no nothing, right? And so this is where crypto comes into play, and all the things that I heard for a little while, and I was like, yeah, I kind of get it, but I don't really know why. I'm telling a lot of people, I'm not saying go invest in crypto or anything, but I definitely will tell you to go do your research because I personally believe the next 2 years are going to make a lot of people extremely wealthy if they know what to do with it. And the best part about this is that people like you, me, your listeners, etc., think about how much magic we have to give to the world. Think about what we could do with millions of dollars, right? Think about how much love we could put into the world. And that's why I'm telling everyone, please go do your own research. Go learn this stuff because it is very important. And money is not everything. It's not. But if we want to go up against quote unquote the powers that be, if we want to bring light to the world, not even try to fight darkness, just bring light to the world, we're going to need resources to do that as well, right? We're going to need income of some sort. And so if you guys want to learn more about that, my buddy Brandon Jill Williams, I will say his website is, I think it's hilarious, but some people may get offended. So apologies ahead of time, but onestupidfuck.com for him. And then on Instagram, my friend Tamika, Paths to Freedom. So it's Paths, number 2, FRDM 2022. She's the best when it comes to discharge. She is a real one, and then my buddy Jay Griff has a great mastermind called the Level Up Collective. He teaches a lot of stuff in there, including investing and whatnot. So a lot of good ways to plug in. Brandon's stuff's all free. Tamika's stuff is online free. You can go on YouTube and look up her discharge that shit workshops and whatnot. And then for anyone who wants to find me too, you can find me on Instagram at the real Ryan Sprague. SPRAGUE is my last name. highlyoptimized.me for the next enrollment period of the Conscious Cannabis Collective, where we talk about everything in there. Like, again, what I always tell everyone is that even though it looks like at face value, it's about cannabis, and in the big way it is, right? It's really about how can we learn to connect with a plant that increases self-awareness, and then whatever that awareness is, that's what we dive into in there. So we're diving into mother-father wounds, we're diving into goal setting, we're diving into manifesting, we're diving into this stuff, financial literacy, sovereignty, everything. So it's a really cool hub. We got people from all around the world in there. And then, of course, the podcast, This One Time on Psychedelics. You can find it wherever podcasts are hosted. And I have a blast with that one. It's super fun. We've had some amazing guests on there. I think we just released episode 145 last week. So we've been rocking with it for a while. So, yeah, that's where you can find me as well.
No, I love it. That's fantastic. And I'll have those links in the show notes. It's like you've listened to this podcast before. Knew exactly what was coming up because that was the next question and where folks can find you. So I'll have that link below. And man, you are a wealth of knowledge, which is why I know there has to be a part 2, probably talking more on that sovereignty movement for folks. Because I know a lot of I can already hear the Twitter fingers just going nuts trying to Google everything you just said. So rest assured, I have the links in the show notes below. Last question, Ryan. And it's usually the heaviest. I save it for last. It's what is something you've seen or something that's happened to you that shapes the way you view the world as a man?
Let me think into that for a second. I would say my father's passing, because it really taught me a lot. It taught me and like allowed me to view the world as a man through the lens of like, you must follow your heart and do what you love, right? And if you allow yourself to, how do I put this? Like, if you love yourself enough to give yourself the space to be able to be that medicine for people, then the repercussions of that are going to be powerful. Like, when I went to my father's funeral, there were so many people that were just sharing stories of him, things like that. And so what I took from that as a man is like, you never know the impact of what can happen when you are highly optimized and able to access your magic in every moment of every day. You never know if just the door you hold for someone with that real smile you give, not the fake one, not the, hey, how's it going? Where you don't really want to know how it's going. Like that real, like, yeah, how you really doing? Like, I want to know, right? Like, my dad was always someone who was able to bring that forth because he followed his heart. And so I took that, from him, and really like that changed my view of the world forever.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that because there's
Yeah.
so many of us that unfortunately get that reminder too late in life. And being that you
Mm.
were able to reflect on that and share that, hopefully I know uh listeners are going to connect with that and heed that advice. Ryan,
Yeah.
this has been fantastic. I've had a great time, and I know the audience did as well. So thank you for taking the time to share your expertise and your experience with us today, man. It's been great.
Yeah. Thank you, Ted. And thank you for everyone who tuned in. Super excited. This is amazing. My battery is so charged. Excited for the day ahead. And I hope you're all having the best day ever.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. And if they're not, they're about to with this recap, Ryan, because this has been great. Thank you again. Thank you to the audience for making it to the end. And you already know we need to run it back in terms of all the nuggets that Ryan dropped along the way. In order to laugh, you have to feel safe. Me and Ryan laugh
Mm,
on the pre-interview, on the multiple calls we've been on together. The spirit is infectious. And Ryan, you make me feel safe as well. So I appreciate the container that you create, even in a digital
bro.
space. Think of those relationships that you have, guys, that you're able to laugh because those are the relationships in which you feel safe. Creating
Mm,
closure, using cannabis for a higher purpose than the coping mechanism and the escapism that it provides. What do you
mm,
view the problem to be? This is to the naysayers who call it the devil's lettuce and who haven't been enlightened to the impacts that cannabis can have in people's lives. What do you say the problem actually is? Now, oftentimes people who are connecting with a plant in an unhealthy way, or maybe you're connecting with a vice in an unhealthy way, it's often because it's covering something else up. I love it when Ryan said, issues stored in our tissues. The body keeps the score. And
mm,
unfortunately, we use our mind to try and alleviate trauma when we need to go into our bodies, which is what these plant medicines can do. Cannabis made me. Are you putting the responsibility on the plant just like you would put the responsibility on a spouse, or are you taking the responsibility yourself? Are you able to step away from the substance, step away from the website, step away from that coping mechanism for at least 3 days to show that you have ownership over it and you clear your mechanism so you can have a clean and pure connection when you integrate? Cried out and just back to joy. How do kids process
mm,
emotion versus adults? Oftentimes we bottle it up. We let the stories and the prescription from the world change and shape the way we view things and our reaction to them. And oftentimes we might hold on to that emotion. We never cry it out, so we never get back to that joy that
mm,
we're supposed to feel. And our hero's journey is everything in life. You might be going through your hero journey right now. Think of the results that you want. Identify who has those results and listen to their advice and their warnings, much like Ryan has. He's a wealth of knowledge because he's followed those who've done the same thing. And you must follow your heart and do what you love. A lesson that we can all take to heart. Guys, thank you so much
mm.
for making it to the end. Ryan, thank you again. And make sure to hit that like,
Thank
that
you, brother.
subscribe button for a new episode each and every single week. And of course, the best compliment you can give us is by sharing this with someone else you know can get value from it as well. As always, guys, as we say at the end, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without first the pain. Let's grow.
But let's impact some good today.